Send her to Earth, and let her rot among those short-lived insects.
In Hammerfest, the same bakery, the same research station, the same ice plane. Lev and Nora married on a snowy day. Sigrid held the bouquet. Old Lars was not there to see it, but the northwest wind kept his memory alive. The twins were born exactly at the sunrise of the polar day after 2 months of absolute darkness. Liana cried first, Soren second. Nora held both in her arms and looked at Lev. Lev said, "Half a cup of coffee?" Nora laughed. "We are 4 now, Lev. We need a whole thermos." The sun rose from behind the glacier, light that had traveled thousands of years to reach this moment. Nora thought that perhaps the stars really do listen to people. Perhaps all those years ago when she sang to them from the palace balcony, one of those stars, a wandering star in a distant galaxy, had heard her and had planned to throw her into the only place where she would never forget how to fly, Earth. And now, with the smell of fresh bread rising from the bakery below, with the sound of Liana's crying and Soren's laughter, with Lev's hands splitting the coffee, Nora, who is now simply Nora, knew that the fate of wandering stars is not to remain in the sky forever. Sometimes they must fall, so that they may learn that even in falling, a home can be built. In the Andromeda Empire, the worth of a princess was measured by the number of galaxies in which her blood flowed. The throne was passed not to the firstborn, but to the fertile. Every princess was required to produce at least 3 heirs for the empire by the age of 20. If not, the palace became a strange place for someone who was no longer useful. Princess Honora, the 3rd daughter of Emperor Zarkos, could not bear children, but worse than that, she was dangerously kind. In the glass palaces of Andromeda, where compassion was seen as a sign of mental decline and a sincere smile as proof of decay, Honora's smile was considered a greater crime than infertility. She watered the flowers in the floating gardens that no one else noticed. She joked with servants who had no names. And at night, on the southern balcony of the palace, she sang to the stars that were crushed beneath her feet. Her uncle, Lord Corvus, had waited years for this weakness. The night the imperial physicians announced that there was no sign of uterine activity in Princess Honora, Corvus went to the council chamber before the princess could even catch her breath. "Send her to Earth," he said. "Let her rot among those short-lived insects. This will be the greatest joke in the history of our empire." The council laughed. Lord Corvus smiled his ancient smile, a smile that reminded everyone of old wounds. Emperor Zarkos closed his eyes. He said nothing. No defense, no objection. He simply waved his hand, as if Honora were a bothersome insect that needed to be brushed off his shoulder. That night, Honora had nothing but the clothes on her back. She was not even allowed to take one of her crystal birds. "Mother," she whispered, her voice breaking. The Queen Mother looked away. Years later, Honora would understand that her mother was also a victim of the same law. But that night, she felt only the cold of betrayal. The Exile capsule broke through Earth's atmosphere at a calculated speed. The destination was the Arctic of Norway, near Svalbard. The temperature at the moment of landing was -32 degrees Celsius. This was no accident. Lord Corvus had ordered the fallen princess to be thrown into a place so cold that even the most desolate outposts of Andromeda would seem like paradise by comparison. The capsule landed in the middle of a polar morning. Honora fell out of the door wearing a thin dress with no belongings. Snow reached her knees. The wind blew so hard that she could not even hear her own crying. The first person to find her was an old man named Lars, a retired seal hunter. He was digging his freezer out of the snow when he saw the half-dead body of a young girl whose skin, under the false midnight sun, shimmered faintly blue. "Good God," he muttered. "She is one of those star aliens." In all his life, Lars had never believed in science fiction. But he took off his gloves and grabbed Honora's frozen hands. He was a former NATO soldier, big and burly, with a heart softer than whale blubber. He took her to his cabin. It took 2 weeks for her to recover from the cold shock. During that time, Lars asked no questions. He just made salmon soup every day, lit candles, and said, "This is northern Norway, girl. In this cold, no one asks where you came from. They only ask if you have enough blankets," Honora cried, not from weakness, but from this unconditional human kindness, something the Andromeda Empire called a sickness of the soul. After her recovery, she was taken to a small town in northern Norway called Hammerfest, the northernmost town in Europe. Norwegian authorities, informed through secret diplomatic channels of her existence, gave her fake documents. Her new name was Nora Berg, born 1995, a climate scientist from the University of Bergen. She was given a small apartment above a bakery, the sound of kneading dough every morning at 4 a.m., the smell of cinnamon and fresh bread, and always, always silence. Nora spent the first month just looking out the window. People walked past her in thick clothes and red faces. No one said hello. Not out of meanness, but out of Scandinavian nature. Then one day, the neighbor's daughter, a 7-year-old girl named Sigrid, knocked on her door. "I heard you are a foreigner," she said. "Come eat cookies with me." Nora laughed involuntarily. It was her first laugh on Earth. It tasted bitter and sweet, like dark chocolate that makes you cry. She started working at a climate research station in northern Norway. Her job was to record changes in natural glaciers. She learned to use a spectrometer, became familiar with concepts like ice albedo feedback. For the first time in her life, she was doing work that actually helped someone. No one at the station knew she was a princess. They only knew that Nora was a little strange. She read without a light in total darkness, and sometimes her eyes turned green in flash photographs. 3 years passed. During those 3 years, Nora learned that human pain is deeper than galaxies, but their smiles are more sincere than any glass crown in Andromeda. She witnessed the death of old Lars, her rescuer. At his funeral, the whole town came, not because Lars had any rank, he had none, but because of his kindness. For the first time, Nora understood that in Andromeda, no one cried for dead servants. She began to write. A notebook filled with observations. Humans care about things that cannot be measured. Memories, the smell of bread, the sound of rain on the tin roof. Our galaxy has none of these things. Lev Anderson was an atmospheric scientist, 34 years old, thin, with glasses that were always crooked on one side. His specialty was the study of the northern lights and the effect of solar winds on Earth's mesosphere. He came to the station every morning with a thermos of coffee and drank that same coffee until evening. His thermos had a dent from the time he fell off a train several years ago, and no one came to the hospital with him. The first time he saw Nora, she was in the break room, eating a piece of brown bread with white cheese while staring at glacier melt charts. Lev said, "If you stare like that, the ice won't melt. You will just get depressed." Nora looked up. The first thing she saw in Lev was the absence of greed. His eyes were curious, but not intrusively so. The kind of look that says, "You can talk if you want. You don't have to." It took weeks for them to say more than hello and goodbye. Until one day, a snowstorm trapped them in the station together, 12 hours stuck in a small metal hut with an electric heater that kept turning on and off. Nora did not tell him about Andromeda, but she talked about loneliness in a crowd, about how you can be in a busy palace and still feel like you do not exist. Lev said, in Norway we call that the light behind the closed door. It means when everything seems to be in its place, but you feel like you are outside the house you live in." That night, Lev split his coffee in half and gave one half to her. Half the coffee, half the cold. "It works." Nora accepted. The coffee was bitter, but the hands that held the cup were warm. Their relationship grew slowly, like a tide that no one notices rising until your shoes get wet. Lev never asked why her eyes glowed like sapphires on a polar night. He never asked why her body temperature was 2 degrees lower than a normal human's. He simply accepted her, the way the ocean accepts everything the sky drops into it. One night, he took her to the northern ice plain. The aurora covered the entire sky, green, purple, red, colors that Nora had only seen in her father's palace, on artificial silk fabrics. Lev said, "Science says this is the collision of charged solar particles with Earth's magnetic field. But I think the soul of the galaxy is talking to the Earth." Nora looked at him. For the first time since her exile, she felt that someone saw her, not her title, not her inability. Just her. As she was, "Lev," she said, her voice trembling. "What if I told you I am not human?" Lev stared at the aurora for a few seconds. Then he said, "Then you must belong up there, and you chose to come down. That is why you are satisfied with half a cup of coffee." That night, Honora told him everything. The Andromeda Empire, the fertility law, her uncle Corvus, the lying physicians, the exile. She even said, "My physicians told me my womb is like a frozen moon. Beautiful, cold, lifeless." Lev turned to her. He took off his gloves and placed his bare hands on hers. Frozen moons, Nora, still create tides. Maybe those physicians knew nothing about oceans. You do not know what power sleeps in your depths. For the first time in her life, not in Andromeda, not on Earth, Nora believed that perhaps something really did live inside her. That night, they kissed for the first time. The taste of Lev's kiss was sea salt and cold coffee. 1 year later, Nora noticed that she could no longer finish her morning coffee without feeling nauseous. At first, she thought the station's canned food had gone bad. But when the nausea continued for 3 weeks, she took out the secret medical scanner she had smuggled from Andromeda from under the floorboard. The device took 3 minutes. During those 3 minutes, Nora sat on a chair and pressed her hands against her thighs. She looked at the walls of her small room. An old poster of the Lofoten Mountains, a half-burned candle, Lev's shoes by the door. The device beeped. Result: pregnancy. 2 fetuses, completely healthy. 14 weeks. Nora did not scream. She did not cry. She just found it hard to breathe, as if someone had sucked all the air out of the room. She placed her hands on her belly, a belly that had been flat until now, and now held a small curve she had not noticed. How was this possible? In Andromeda, 14 independent physicians had confirmed it: inactive uterine structure, absence of primary follicles, absolute infertility. But here, on this primitive planet, with its polluted air and weak gravity and chaotic magnetic field, she was pregnant. That night, Lev came home late. He hung up his white coat and said, "I am exhausted. We had a strange solar storm today." Nora sat him down. She took his hands and said, "I have something to tell you." When he heard the news, Lev did not move for a full 20 seconds. Then he stood up, went to the kitchen, poured 2 cups of coffee, placed one in front of Nora, and said, "This one is yours. I am not splitting it anymore. We are 3 now." And that night, for the first time, Nora cried. Not from sadness, from wonder, from the belief that perhaps the universe, or the galaxy, or something else had a different plan for her. Beyond the fertility law of Andromeda, beyond her uncle's hatred, she began to investigate. While Lev slept at night, she took out the medical scanner and analyzed her own blood. The result was horrifying. Her infertility was a lie, a medical conspiracy orchestrated by Lord Corvus. The injections she had been given in Andromeda under the guise of infertility treatment were actually powerful ovulation suppressants. Earth, with its polluted atmosphere, fine carbon particles, and weak magnetic field, unlike Andromeda, which was biologically sterile, had neutralized those toxins over 3 years. Earth had given her something the Empire had stolen: the freedom of her own body. And now, 2 small hearts were beating inside her. The heart of a girl and a boy. Nora could have stayed. She could have lived in Hammerfest, raised her children by the sea and the northern lights, and no one would ever know who she was. But something inside her told her this was not the end. Her uncle Corvus was still on the throne. Her father, the weak emperor, still believed the lie. And more importantly, thousands of other women in Andromeda might have been victims of forced infertility just like her. She had to go back. Lev said without hesitation, "I am coming with you." Norwegians are the only people who are not afraid of traveling to the galaxy. We are Vikings, remember? The return took 3 months of planning. Using her technical knowledge, Nora stole a small research ship from the Arctic base with the help of 2 young scientists who trusted her. The ship was old, not designed for interstellar travel, but Nora hacked into circuits that even Andromeda's chief engineers did not recognize. On the night of the launch, Sigrid, the neighbor girl who was now 10 years old, gave Nora a red fabric bracelet. "For the children," she said, "so they remember where they came from." The ship broke through Earth's atmosphere. Nora looked one last time at the blue planet. Earth, her place of exile, her prison, and now her home. Inside her belly, the two babies kicked, as if to say, "Go, mother. It is time." The ship landed at Andromeda's ceremonial spaceport. No announcement, no welcome. Nora opened a door herself. She wore a dress sewn from old Lars's blankets, and over it, a white robe embroidered with the pattern of the Northern Lights. She wore no crown. Her crown was her large belly, twins who could be born any moment. The palace corridors had changed. More mirrors had been installed, perhaps so that no one would have to see themselves. The guards recognized her but did not stop her. Perhaps they had no orders to stop her. Or perhaps her glowing eyes reminded them of something. The council chamber was full. Emperor Zarkos sat on the crystal throne, thinner than before, with sunken eyes. Lord Corvus stood beside him, wearing the same wound-like smile. But when the chamber door opened and Nora walked in, with her belly waving beneath the white robe, the smile vanished from his face. Emperor Zarkos rose from his seat. His voice trembled. "Honora, this is impossible." Corvus shouted, "Fraud! This is a fraud. She was infertile. The physicians confirmed it." Nora walked forward step by step. Her legs were heavy, but not from the pregnancy, from the weight of years on her shoulders. Each step crushed a lie beneath her feet. She stopped at the center of the chamber, the same spot where the council had laughed at her exile 5 years ago. Her voice was clear and steady. "Father," she said, "do you know what your brother injected into me? Not vitamins, not fertility boosters, poison, strong suppressants. He bribed 14 physicians, 14. They all knew, all except me." Corvus stepped back. "These are false accusations." Emperor Zarkos looked at his nephew. Something broke in his eyes. Perhaps a truth he had been running from for years. Nora continued, "You sent me to Earth as a joke. You said, 'Let her rot among those primitive insects,' but those insects taught me what it means to be a mother. Not by the force of law. Not by the compulsion of the throne. By choice. By staying. By loving even when no one loves you." She placed her hands on her belly. The babies kicked. She felt as if the entire chamber felt those kicks, as if a mild earthquake shook everyone. "These are Liana and Soren," she said. "They are heirs to no empire. They are heirs to a planet that taught me that power is not in childbirth. Power is in being loved enough by someone who says, 'Half the coffee, half the cold.'" Lev, who had been standing by the door until then, entered the chamber. He wore Norwegian clothes, a ruffled sweater, hiking boots. The guards tried to stop him, but Nora just looked at them. They stepped back. Lev stood beside Nora. He said nothing. He just placed his hand on her shoulder, the same hand that had offered half a cup of coffee. Corvus tried to flee, but 2 guards who had been taking his salary for years now blocked his way. Emperor Zarkos ordered his arrest. He stepped down from the throne and walked toward his daughter. "Honora," he said, "can you forgive me?" Nora looked into her father's eyes. A broken old man. Not like the cold exile she remembered. More like a lonely grandfather who had just realized he had lost his child for no reason. Nora said softly, "Forgiveness is something Earth people do, Father. I am still learning." Then she turned and looked at the entire chamber. The counselors who had once laughed at her now had their heads down. The Queen Mother, who had looked away that night, was crying. Nora reached into her robe pocket and pulled out her notebook of observations. She tore out one page and dropped it on the floor. On it was written, "Humans care about things that cannot be measured. Memories. The smell of bread. The sound of rain. Our galaxy has none of these things, so our galaxy is poor, not them. I wrote this on the coldest night on Earth," she said, "right after I learned how to cry without being ashamed." Then, without permission, without bowing, she turned and walked away. Lev walked with her. Behind them, the council chamber fell into silence. A silence louder than any scream. At the palace gate, the galactic wind blew. Ice particles danced in the air. Nora took a deep breath and placed her hand on her belly. "Liana Soren," she whispered. Welcome to your mother's home. It is cold here, but remember, cold can be defeated with half a cup of coffee. Behind them, the Andromeda Palace emitted no light for the first time in 1,000 years. As if it were ashamed, they returned to Earth, not as exiles, not as fugitives, as those who chose.